I want to welcome everybody to the December monthly meeting of the Division 5 of the Lone Star region. Today we have a special guest all the way from Scotland, uh, President of the NMRA, to join us. So this is a outside of our normally monthly meeting schedule that's on the third Monday, but he wanted to join us, so we worked out a time that works since he's 6 hours ahead of us out there. So we appreciate him making the time to join us, and then everybody else that joined too, adjusting their schedule to be able to join as well. So we'll look forward to hearing from him here in a little bit. Do you want to tell everybody? Let me see if I can pull up my notes. And the just want to remind everybody about the Lone Star Region Convention that's going to be February 15th and 17th down in Pasadena. This is going to be in conjunction with the San Jac Model Railroad Club train show that's on Saturday the 17th, and convention attendees will get free admission to that. The cost of the registration is $80, and for registrant, $50 for spouse. Registration includes barbecue dinner Saturday night and admission to the train show. And then the website address to register is turbotrains.com/2024 Lone Star. And I'll post that here in the link for anybody that needs that. So I have been sending out emails to that for that. So last I heard a few weeks ago, the registration's been pretty light on it. So do want to encourage anybody that can join to register early. So if we don't get enough registrations in by the end of the year, we may have to cancel the show. So we don't want to do that. So just if you can spread the word out to other people too, please do so. And I've realize it was not till like about a month ago when I actually got the last meeting when I actually got the information for all this. So it's kind of one of those things. I think we've been so busy with the national convention, and and then I was looking at doing it here in San Angelo, and that didn't work out. So thanks to the two gentlemen in that region down there, I forgot their names. That picked it up.
And
Yeah.
Bob Barnett.
Okay. Yeah, Bob Barnett. Who's the other one again, Jeff? You
Chuck
cut off.
Lind.
Chuck Lind. Oh yes, yeah, that's right. So
Yeah, and the train show won't get canceled. The convention will get canceled.
Yeah, just the convention part. So the convention's always great for the region. You got contests down there, clinics, and it's great just to meet with everybody, talk trains, and great time. So we want to make sure these conventions keep going forward on that. So anyway, want to remind people of that. The Abilene group is holding an open house this weekend. It's actually, of course, by the time you'll hear this, they'll be closed at 5. So this afternoon. So and then coming up in January is the let's see if I get to my notes back again. No. Okay, there we go. No, that one didn't load. Okay. All right. Yes, January 20 through 21st is the Dallas area train show, and that's at the Plano Event Center in Plano. So those are the things that I had on my calendar. If anybody else has anything events to add, just speak up and let me know. All right. So if does anybody have anything they'd like to share or talk about or questions they want to ask? Any show and tells or anything? Okay. Well, I think with that, we'll get to our clinician or our guest speaker. So, Gordy Robinson, he's the president of the NMRA, and um, so you're gonna have to tell me which town in Scotland you're at. Don't
Well,
remember which one. So,
it's which island?
which
So
island? Yes. The
it's
or
it's Orkney is the
yeah.
county, which
Okay.
is 70 islands, and the island that I live on is called Bury,
Okay.
Burray.
Okay. I remember it was the Orkney Islands. But yeah. So Gordy's joining us. He's been president of the NMRA since 2020, I think. Is
21,
21.
21.
Okay. Yeah. So he's been doing a lot of changes, and I think really have done a lot for the organization. And I appreciate him. I do extend my appreciation myself to everything you've done for the organization, and look forward to seeing what's to come. So with that, I want to give it over to you and let you talk with what you have, and then I'm sure we might have some Q&A here at the end, for that. So
That'd be awesome. So my sound there just keeps cutting out a little bit. So if I do start cutting out, will you let me know and
yeah,
I'll recover anything.
sure.
Um,
It's been
so
sounding good on my end so far.
that's okay. That's good. Hopefully it keeps going. It's a bit wet and windy here, so it usually affects our internet because it's all underground. So the water gets in and it affects it. I've got yep, there we go. I can present, so I will share my screen. I'm just gonna play around and make sure I can see y'all in case anyone puts their hand up. Okay, so Brooks asked me to talk to you about FreemoN Modules, in particular about the 3D printed FreemoN Modules, which I got into so that we could bring, or I could bring a module to the National Train Show and National Convention in Grapevine, which we did. And then those modules are now doing a tour of the West Coast of the United States. So don't worry if you don't know what FreemoN is. We'll start from the very beginning. If you do know what it is, I apologize. We'll go through a bit of introduction slides and then we'll get into the 3D printing and how we do this and what we do. And I've got some examples to show you and stuff like that. So yep, I'm Gordy. I'm do things for the NMRA, which I appreciate people's appreciation for. But I do things for the NMRA, but I'm also a model railroader too. I model in N scale, HO and O, but O being two rail, not that other thing. And I got into FreemoN because we needed the Ops Roadshow to continue, and the best way to do that was to set up a modular layout. So FreemoN gave us the most space for our book. So FreemoN, this is the FreemoN setup at the Salt Lake City National Train Show. If anybody went there, it was a really good show, really good space. It was absolutely massive building that the National Train Show was in. It was down from the downtown area, but you could get the light rail straight to it. So it was really quite convenient. This was the layout. As you can see, pretty big. There's no it's free flowing, it's free form. T-track, you can argue, is a bit free form, but it's not because it's got to fit on tables. So it restricts you to being straight curve, straight curve, straight curve, or straight junction, straight curve. Fremo can be any shape of module that you want. It allows you to pretty much model the real thing. That's the whole point of it. Unlike N-rail or N-track, sorry, or T-track. And an N-track has its uses, and so does FreemoN. And these guys do they have connected N-rail, which is a special interest group of the NMRA, has connected all three module types, but FreemoN is probably one of the most unrestricted ones. So it uses code 55 rail, not P code, uses Atlas or microengineering so that it's the most prototypical. The whole point of FreemoN is to be more prototypical with your modular layouts, both in operations and look and feel. There isn't a set scenery other than it's got to be summer and it's got to be blended so that if you build desert, you do some kind of transition from desert to green scenery, ideally. And you build a module that transitions, but you can have as many deserty modules as you want. And also that we don't do things like having roads going off the end so that the scenery is consistent. The minimum radius is 22 inches, which is quite big for N scale, and it's number 6 turnouts or bigger anywhere on the main line. You can get away with number 5s if it's industrial trackage, but otherwise it's not really part of the standard. The only thing that's fixed is the end plate design, and that really we'll go through and look at what that is in a minute, but it's very, very limited what that restriction actually is. It's all to do with making sure that you can clamp 2 modules together. Because it's so loose and what people can do, it does allow quite a lot of clubs and groups to actually work together. And in Europe, they set up absolutely massive FreemoN module layouts, and FreemoHO and FreemoO. So they actually have O-scale 2-rail Fremo as well in Europe. In the US, it's becoming more and more popular. Certainly a lot more FreemoN modelers and a lot more groups. There's one just been started in Dallas, Fort Worth. And there's other groups in Oklahoma and all over the place. The standardized scenery is only at the end, so that basically means that the end of your module is flat, but anywhere in between is anything goes. Can go up, can go down, as long as it, within reason. You can pretty much do anything you want scenery-wise. It's got to kind of be a bit more realistic, more prototypical than some of the T-Track modules you get, but you can, within reason, do anything that you want. The guys use, in the US, use DCC. For DCC, they use LocalNet and Digitrax. In Europe, tend to use Lens. But you build your modules in such a way that you could, you've got a DCC bus and you can connect any power as long as everybody's using the same system at a setup, you should be fine. The one of the key things from an NMRA perspective is it's mandated that all of your rolling stock has to meet or exceed the NMRA standards. Because these modules, and when we do operations and layouts, we want it to work. We don't want it to keep coming off the track. So the guys actually use the NMRA standards for rolling stock, and they do test. And at setups, they will set up a testing table and they will adjust stuff to the NMRA standards.
Gordy,
Yeah.
when you said exceeds NMRA standards, what does that really mean?
It means if there's a recommended practice, for example, weight in cars, they might add more weight to a car than the recommended practice.
Okay, thanks.
That's okay. So Fremo, this is the standard FreemoN plate. So this is the bit that we have to pay the most attention to because this is where one module meets another. Now, the maximum width of a FreemoN module is 24 inches, which is why the little drawing that might be a bit small on your screens, the little drawing there is a 24-inch module. But the minimum is 12 inches, and that's how wide my modules are because they've got to go into a suitcase to fly across the Atlantic. So width is an issue, so smaller the better to get inside a box, basically. All end plates are 6 inches high. That's the fixed standard. You can make the sides of your modules lower than 6 inches. So if you've got a bridge scene or you're doing a dock or any mountain scenery or whatever you want to do, but at the end plate, it has to be 6 inches high. Ideally, standard traditional modules, which I would recommend you to build if you were not wanting to be ultra lightweight or didn't have that requirement, is 18mm birch plywood. Now, 2 18mm 12-inch wide, 6-inch high ends weigh about 3 or 4 pounds before you add any ironmongery to them or leg pockets or do anything else. So the weight's quite heavy. That in itself, those 2 wooden end plates is heavier than one of my modules. So it's quite, it's quite a lot of weight that we're saving. With that comes some inherent weaknesses. We have to be a little bit more careful with a 3D printed module, but we'll come on to that in a little bit. The end plates are secured together with C-clamps. That's the end of a module. If your module is made up of multiple boards or sections, you can use whatever method you want to line up the modules, but the recommended is C-clamps because that allows you to do any height adjustments or tweak around if anything's moved or expanded, especially in the kind of heat you guys get in Texas. So we'll talk about heat for a second, right? So when we did the setup at Grapevine, somebody had the great idea of leaving their modules. Now, they come from Atlanta, so it's hot in Atlanta, but it's not Texas hot. It's more humid. The humidity is totally different. The heat is a bit less. And when their modules arrived, we spent nearly a day and a half trying to get their track to work on their module. And in the end, we gave up for the night and said, we'll come back to it in the morning. We were about to go and do a tour of Dallas-Fort Worth and buy as much Code 55 flex track as we could to relay this thing. And it just resolved itself as it is acclimatized to the hotel's air conditioning. So heat is a problem. And you know, so that's why we see clamp everything. And it's like, well, you know, the welding clamps, generally somewhere between 9 and 11-inch clamps. You can get them at Harbor Freight in the US. They're a bit more expensive and difficult to get in the UK. The fascia has got to contour to the scenery. There's various ways people do that. Generally, the traditional masonite way, but you can even do that with big sheets of styrene. If you get big black sheets of styrene, you can easily use an X-Acto knife to conform to your scenery. The fascia's got to be black because I'm 3D printing, as we'll show you in a little bit. I printed black filament, which means my stuff is already black, saves the paint. Paint is heavy. That's why aeroplanes get heavier when they paint them. So paint is heavy. We don't use any paint on my modules just to save a little bit more weight. And the other key thing as a difference to any other module standard is FreemoN is viewed from both sides, which means if you make a narrow module, and you need to cut up a building, for example, it becomes a bit more difficult. You have to think a bit more about what you can model on the actual bench work and what you have to model or imagine off the bench work. If you wanted to look at the FreemoN standards, you can go to free-mon.net and all of the standards are there. There's some really good images, galleries, and PowerPoints, etc. So this is what a standard module would look like. So if we'd built this module with ply and foam, this is what one would look like. You can see that the fascia's kind of been cut in a funny shape there. That's okay because it's only the end plate that has to be 6 inches tall, and you're going to put a skirt on it anyway, so it'll hide that. I don't know what they were thinking when they used a bit of interesting wood there. Maybe it was a weight saving exercise. I don't know. But you know, you've got your 4 sides and your foam insert. That is going to be a significant amount heavier than my modules. So why not just plywood? Well, this is what it comes down to ultimately, weight. And I apologize for kilograms, but I'm in the UK and we use kilograms. So I've tried to do this in ounces to give you an idea. So 2 end plates at 12 inches wide in birch ply weigh about 30 ounces, about 850 grams. They can be a lot heavier. A module that's only 2 foot long by 1 foot wide out of plywood with frames and bracing and metal work and etc. is up to 10 pounds or 4 kilos if you do it in the heaviest possible plywood that you could. But 3D printing can get that down to weighing about 2 pounds. So you can save a significant amount of weight. And that's after by the time you've built it, put foam on it, the 3D printing and the foam is probably weighing about a pound and a few ounces. Once you put maybe 2 pounds and a few ounces, maybe is what you get into when you put all the scenery on, you maybe 3 pounds. So it's a lot lighter than a traditional module. And these things, I'll show you. You can pick them up with your little finger. They're really, really light. So there are some challenges with 3D printing. If we used 100% infill, they'd be really, really strong, but it would then weigh more than plywood. So not ideal. The build plate is kind of limiting because the size of your printer does limit somewhat the size of end plate you can do. So the build plate on your 3D printer can be limiting. I started off and did my first modules on an Ender 3, which is a small Creality printer, pretty standard, 8-inch by 8-inch build plate. Now I'm up to something that's kind of, about 14 inches by 14 inches. So now I can print an entire 12-inch end plate in one go. Filament is more expensive than a sheet of plywood, but plywood is getting more and more expensive since I wrote this presentation. So plywood is now probably more expensive than filament at the minute, but that just depends. So if you buy your filament at Black Friday or in a bulk deal, you can get stuff a lot cheaper. You might need to learn some basic CAD if you want to go beyond the basic shapes that I've already produced, and my files are all online. I'll show you where to get them in a bit. But CAD's not that difficult to learn, and you can always use Fusion 360 and get a free license for that product. Also, some of the printed materials depends what plastics you use, but sometimes you need to use special adhesives. But to be perfectly honest, you can more than get away with just using normal super glue with a medium viscosity super glue. You don't want something that's too thin because it's going to run all over the place. But kind of something that's medium viscosity will hold the model, or hold the structure together quite well as you glue it. There are other specialty glues that you can get, and I've had real success with them, but now in the UK I can't get them, so it becomes a bit difficult. So when I first decided to do this, we did a little bit of a proof of concept, and that's what you can see down on the left here. See that is in centimeters, in millimeters. That's just under 6 inches long, so it's definitely not full size, and that was printed at 30%. The reason for printing at 30% is because it allows you to test everything that will fit. There might be the tolerances get a lot tighter, that's the only thing, but it allows you to test it and test fit stuff. So this originally was printed at 12 inches wide and 18 inches long. And at that point, I suddenly realized, actually, this isn't going to fit in the box that I've got. So I had to slice that down to a 12 by 12 module. It looked the same. I just made the embankments there shorter. I lost the 3 inches there and made that a little bit shorter. But this allowed us to test it without using tons of material. We could tweak the design. And here's kind of the epitome of what are the ultimate this thing that you can get to with 3D printing. FreemoN Modules, this actually has the scenery already modeled into it, or a sub base of scenery. I really wouldn't recommend people doing that anymore. I did it as a test. I would never do it again. And the reason why I wouldn't do it again is because it took just so much time on CAD. Whereas in foam, I could have just carved that and it would have been done. But it made a really strong module for a bridge. So maybe I would do it again. But now it's easier if you just stick to 4 sides and a foam top, which we'll go on to in a second. So here's what the frame looked like on the original proof of concept. You can see that module construction on the side there, where it all slotted together. It made me a 12 by 12 frame. It was only 4 inches tall because the scenery glued down onto the top that gave me my 6 inches. Couple of little points there. I used 50% infill on the ends to try this out with a fully 3D printed module, and that did work, but it didn't save me very much weight. And we've got a new way of doing this in version 2.0 that I'll show you in a second. So there was a clamping zone, put 6mm holes in the end plates, which were originally going to be used for bolts, but in the end, it was easier to just use reusable cable ties to fly it to. This is to secure it into the box. We put a slot in there and added a cross member, and that made that really, really strong. So here was the scenery subbase. You can see how kind of complex the shapes are with that and the angles. It just took so much time. Didn't need a fascia though. Didn't need the fascia cutting for it, that's for sure. You can do things like adding holes for exactly where you want your track feeders to be. It is great. And if you've got the time to 3D print scenery, go for it. But I won't be doing it again. And this is what it looked like underneath. This is what they look like when they're on the printer. You can see that that's not solid on the right there. That's got the infill. That's what the wavy lines are. That's the infill. So it's quite hollow inside, but it's structurally quite strong. Saves a ton of weight. And so this is on my kitchen. This is in my kitchen. This was it going together. And we ended up with something that looks like that. So you can see it's now a bit shorter. And even though I'm an MMR, I like to admit my own mistakes. When I shrunk this down, I failed to measure this properly. And I ended up having to print off a 10mm strip to glue down the middle because I scaled it wrong when I shrunk it down. But it didn't matter because there was a road going over that and it hid all that when I finished the scenery. So we started to just quickly lay in some scenery. I don't know how you guys do your scenery, but one tip I've got on scenery is if you've got the brown packing paper, it's really good to do scenery at your workbench and then transfer it to your model. So I work with brown paper, do all my scenery on brown paper that would wrap a parcel in, and then move it, cut it, shape it, do all what I want to do with it. So it's quite good to work in that way, quite quick. Especially because it's very hard to glue scenery material to 3D printed modules. We're just going to point that out. So we then added in a road, start to see this starting to come together. And then this is where this is what it looks like underneath. So you can see those feed wires coming down underneath. This is another end plate clamped on, just to prove that it could do that without crushing. And you'll see the difference with that end plate to the other module is they now have a sheet of very, very thin ply. It's 1.5 mil laser ply. You can buy this on Amazon, and that's just glued in with super glue into the center of my end plates, and it gives a very clear indication. I don't paint it, I leave it bare ply. Gives a very clear indication to the person assembling the modules together at a setup of where the clamp zone is on the 3D printed model. So that meant now that my ends are only 15% infill, not 50, saves a lot of filament and a lot more weight and makes them a lot stronger. So have module, how's it going to travel? Well, it fits inside something called a really useful box. These you can buy in the US from Staples. I love them. Originally, I found these boxes because I was asked to transfer some whiskey with me when I came over to see some customers. And so I brought my whiskey, but I didn't want it to smash in my bag. So I was told to use one of these, and it didn't break at all. These things are pretty cool. They test them by driving vehicles over them. They make an army version of these, and they drive tanks over the top of them, and they don't squash. So they're pretty strong. They're pretty strong. And the other thing is, unlike a normal plastic box that's tapers, these are straight. So they've got straight sides, they don't taper, and they're absolutely bulletproof. And I think Brooks might have seen these boxes in Grapevine, and we had 2 or 3 different types with 2 or 3 different modules in, and they were all in one piece. The bag that the modules came in was destroyed by the airline, but they didn't manage to break my boxes. So, lessons learned. Custom 3D printing scenery subbases is a lot of time. Wouldn't recommend it. Your module needs cross braces, which we've added into the final designs. The infill can be quite low. You can go as low as 10%. You could go as low as 5%. I would recommend to just stick at 10 or 15%. To do anything new, you need to do a rapid prototype in a smaller scale, because otherwise you're going to burn through tons of filaments. And ends that are printed at 50% infill are really expensive, and they are almost just as heavy as plywood. It saves you only about 50% of your weight. And realistically, only the clamping zone in the end plate is where the strength needs to be. And it's very difficult in slicing software to say, only in this area do this percentage of infill, and in the rest of it do 15%. It kind of wants to be all one type of infill. So the plywood, which is really cheap on Amazon. I don't know how much with US inflation it now is in the US, but in the UK, it works out about 50 cents a sheet, which is not a lot at all, and it's really for home crafters to do plywood crafts, so it's reasonably cheap. It saves tons of weight. The cost is a little bit more than a traditional plywood module, but that depends on how much plywood's costing you at the time that you purchase it, so that fluctuates. But the holes for locating the frame sections now in my new designs are all hidden in the end, but in the prototype in version 1.0, they were on the sides, which was a huge mistake. So in the fascia, there was big holes in the fascia where the tabs and slots went together for the modules. Now, well, you won't see this because I'm sharing my screen, but I'll show you some of my end plates after we've done the presentation, and you'll see that all the tabs, all the sides slot into the ends now because I'm able to print the ends on the bigger printer. And that means when everything clamps together, it's a solid side that you see, and there's no kind of holes in it. But in theory, if you've got the ability to modify the designs, the sides, you could do recesses for switches, you could do recesses for control rods, you name it, panels, you name it, you could do it in the sides and just change that design for however you want it to be, and these can look pretty cool. So where did we go to next? So this was the composite ends. These were the plywood recessed in, and as you can see, the slots that I talked about are now in the ends, which saves a lot of unnecessary unsightliness. This is how these things all go together. So it's a modular construction of modules with the plywood in. This was for my original 90-degree crossing module, and I was showing earlier using a 90-degree corner side to make this more like a crossing book shape. This module is out on the West Coast, and they're having a few problems with it. So I'm probably going to rebuild it with make it slightly bigger, but it needed to be no wider than 13 inches to fit in a box. So That's where we went with that. And then you pop in a 20mm foam base. Now in the US, it's 1-inch foam, so it's 25mm. And I've got some drawings that are redone for 25mm foam. I haven't uploaded those to Thingiverse yet. It's all still UK sizes, but 20mm foam is used as for underfloor heating. So you can get it in the US, but it's more common to get 25mm. So I would redo my drawings for US folks. You'd say, or normally I suppose you'd say in the US you use 2-inch blue foam or whatever it is, blue foam, pink foam. You don't need to use 2-inch foam if you're trying to save weight. If you use 1-inch foam, you save 50% of your foam weight. It's not that much, but it makes a difference. So now I've got designs available where you can make any length of side that you want. So the leg pockets, I've also added leg pockets, which I'll show you. They're only in the end plates for now. I haven't done a side with a leg pocket in. So you are limited, probably looking at about 4 feet between legs. If you wanted to do something bigger than that, it would defeat the object of doing a super lightweight module because it's going to be something bigger than one person can carry reasonably without smashing it against a door frame or something like that. So kind of 4 foot should probably your limit, but you can go off in any different way, shape, or size that you want. If you've got a bigger printer or you're happy to make an end plate in 2 parts, you could technically go wider, but I don't want to do that because I've got to fly on a plane. So these are all now available online. You've got a male and female side, and you've got a male and male side, and the tabs are different sizes to help you orientate it the right way. You might think that's blatantly obvious, but when you've had a few beers, it might not be so obvious. So I made it so that they only orientate the correct way up. I suppose that comes from working with my old man when I was a kid designing model trains kits. It's easy to make it as unscrew-upable as possible. And then there is also a module end that's available on Thingiverse where the 2 sections plug together, so you can print it on a small print bed with an 8x8 print bed. But ideally, if you want to get into this properly, you need a big printer like the one behind me, and print the ends in one piece is just easier. So there you go. That's how it all starts to come together. There's your cross member and your module sides. So some free resources if you want to have a go at 3D printing modules. You can get my files on Thingiverse, and if you just search for Gordy MMR, my designs will pop up, and they're all there. They've just uploaded another 8 designs the other day, so there's loads more available on there. In terms of tools, this is Fusion 360. You can get a free hobby license for Fusion 360 for personal use only. So if you're not going to be commercially doing anything or selling anything, you can take tips from people. If people want to tip you on Thingiverse, that's okay. But you're not supposed to be using this to go off and send a proof off to China and get a load of models made or anything like that. That's not the purpose. If it's not for your own personal use or you're not giving it away on a commercial free license, then you can't produce it off it technically, as it says right at the top, not for commercial use. But it's a really good tool. Fusion 360 is a step up from SketchUp. Certainly, it's not difficult to learn. It does take a weekend to get your head around, but because it's got the ability to draw in 2D and then extrude it into 3D, it's a lot easier than trying to work out what plane you're in at the point at which you're extruding it. It's easy to draw in 2D if you've done any technical drawing before. So you're also going to need, of course, a 3D printer. It's just been Black Friday, so this is kind of late news. If you've not got a 3D printer already, you need a filament printer, not a resin printer. A resin printer will do you some very detailed modules, more expensive than you're ever going to need them to be, but because it's on that liquid resin, it's going to be extremely brittle. So you want to use filament. I just use PLA or PLA Plus. I don't use ABS or PETG or nylons or anything like that. It's just excessive for what you really need. PLA will do the job. It's cheap. Use PLA. That's an Ender 3. That's one of the cheapest entry-level printers you're going to get. It'll print you as a rectangular module, no problem. If you want to start getting into different shape modules, and I'll show you some. I've got some Y modules for junctions, and I've got some curves. You probably would want a bigger printer. But even a bigger printer, like the one behind me, is less than $500 now. So you compare that to the cost of a brand new HO or N scale DCC sound locomotive. It's not even costing you 2 locomotives. Your slicing software, it'll depend what printer you buy as to what software you use. There are some that you can just download as well. Slicing is just as important as drawing. A lot of people go, oh, you do the drawing and that's it done. No, you need to do the slicing as well. So it'll produce a G code or a TFT file, which is basically tells the printer where to move the head as it goes up the levels. It's not difficult to use. There's loads of YouTube videos on how to use this. It's free software that will come with your printer, and you can get used to it. That's how much you can print on an Ender 3. But if you upscale to a bigger printer, now we start to see how much we can get on one print bed. So there's a complete end plate. There's some curved sides for a curved module, all on one job on the printer. So you know the build size of that is absolutely massive. It's 400 mil by 400 mil, which is about 14 by 14, and it goes up to 480 mil, so it's about 21 inches tall. If you really wanted to go that high, the problem with printing really tall models is it starts to become like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and it doesn't take very much for the printer to lose where it is, and that's your model completely destroyed, kind of like the potter's wheel situation, and you'll end up with a bowl of spaghetti. So in my defense, though, I was left unsupervised and I was just told to go away and figure out how I was going to bring a FreemoN module to Grapevine. I probably could have made one module in plywood and brought that over, but that seemed a bit of a waste. It seemed a bit more of a challenge to go off and invent a whole new way of making modules, and that's kind of what we did. So I'll stop sharing, and I'm just going to go back to camera and show you some of the modules, and then we'll do some questions if that works out the way you wanted to do things, Brooks.
Yeah.
That's okay. So I'll get back over here. Right. So an end plate looks like this, and I know it's difficult because it's in black plastic. Here's one. It's like, here's my Blue Peter moments as it's a kids' TV show in the UK, and they always go, here's one I did earlier, or let me pull something out the oven. So this is an end plate. This is where the foam goes. This is where the side slots in. This is the plywood that we talked about. That's the thickness of them. Now you can see there's these two holes. What are these holes for, you ask? Well, these are the leg pockets. And these are designed, in the US, it's common to use conduit, 3/4 inch conduit. You can use 3/4 inch conduit with my leg pockets. But what my leg pockets are designed for is the universal one standard thing that you can buy anywhere in the world. And that is a broom handle or a brush handle. Okay, so you can go into Home Depot, buy a brush handle, buy as many as you want for a couple of dollars. There's your legs. At the end of the weekend, you give them to the Janny at the place, and the janitor will be more than happy to take 16 new broom handles off you. Okay, one owner, right? And what goes inside here, because the other thing as well is I am not shy in admitting that I am a big guy, right? I'm a big guy. I do not appreciate crawling on the floor, adjusting legs. Why people do it, I do not know. It's not my thing. So the leg adjusters are what go in these slots, which means now we're adjusting height at 50 inches. Very convenient because we're also looking to line it up, and we've got our hand here, and I can't look at whether something's at the right height and also be 50 inches below it. I am no acrobat, and I've yet to meet someone who can do that. So these little adjusters, which I'll hold up to camera over there, these little adjusters sit inside the leg pocket, and then they've got where's the other one? Oh well, I'll just undo this one. So they then have inside them, they have a little threaded slot, and these bits of brass you can buy off Amazon for like $55. And these are actually designed for 3D prints. You heat them up with soldering iron tip, push them in to the print, and then they're solid. There you go. Brooks is kind of holding them up, but we're losing them.
Hold on, let me turn my background off.
That's right. So you can get these things reasonably cheaply. There's Brooks has got them too. There you go. There's tons of different sizes. Yeah.
Big each kit of them.
Yeah. So they're not expensive. And then this is just a little what we call a knob screw. That's a 10 mil one. So it just goes through, goes in, and that's what you use just to lock it in place. Okay. So you undo them both, slot in your broom handles, which are conveniently about 49 inches tall. Remember, your foam that's going on the top is is 1 inch. So you're now at 50 inches with the thing all the way to the top. So it depends. You can always cut a little bit off the broom handle, and the Jan you'll never notice an inch shorter broom right at the end of the weekend, and they were free anyway, so who cares? So that's what an end plate looks like. So these are just pretty standard. They can come in 2 halves, and you slot the halves together, glue it. That gives you a nice center line for centering your track. And your plywood is where your clamp goes, and this distributes the weight. Doesn't weigh very much. These weigh about 280 grams, which I can't tell you what that is in ounces, but it's not a lot. Someone will be able to convert that for me. So we then have our sides, and here's 2 sides glued together. So this is going to go into a module in a second. This is what these end plates are sitting here waiting for. So this is just a seam here where it's glued. Here's the slots for the cross members, which are also 3D printed. Okay, so that's just your side. That would be, this needs a little bit of paint or a little bit of cleanup because it's there's a bit of a stain from some CA there. But we clean that up and that'll come straight off, and that gives you the fascia. So this is going to be a flat module. We might go above. If we go above on the scene, you can buy black styrene and just glue that on. This is plastic and your styrene's plastic. This is a cross member. And your cross member just slots in there and goes across. There's nothing to it. We have some nice triangles, just like triangles, because they're pretty strong. So we have triangles in this. This doesn't weigh very much at all. This allows you to run as many cables as you want, no problem. And that makes up your standard module. But then you can start getting into some really funky stuff. So here's that 90-degree corner that's absolutely perfect. Perfect 90-degree corner. So if we put 4 of those together with 4 end plates, that gives us a crossing module, 90-degree cross. Then we'll get really clever. We glue all that together. We'll get a frame. I'll hold a frame up without the... Here's a frame ready to go together without the foam in it. Pretty solid. So that's ready for the foam. You can see all that together. But then, because we're 3D printing, we can do things in 3D prints that you can't do in plywood. And so, here's a 45-degree curved module. So there's a curve. And you've seen it from the top. There it is from the bottom with 4 leg holes and 2 clamp zones. Okay, so that gets a bit funny and tricky. And yeah, the wife has to help me cut the foam for it. But that works, and that gives you a 45-degree corner. Now, what if we wanted to make a T-junction? Well, we can make a T-shaped junction quite easily. Here's a Y module. So now we've got that 90-degree corner there. We've got 2 custom sides, which are also available on Thingiverse. We've got 3 end plates, and we've got a Y module. So now we can really start going to town. And this fits a 3.5, number 3.5 Y from Atlas, and fits off with 2 curves. So jobs are good in. You put 4 of these together, and you've got endless possibilities for chaos. So you can, go in 4 directions and stuff like that. You put those 45-degree corners on here, maybe going this way, and put a 12-inch square between this and the corner, so you've not got an S-bend. You'll actually be able to you can now make a return loop. So if you put 4 corners together, you get 180 degrees. You put 2 corners on here with 2 12-inch sections, you've now got a balloon loop out of your FreemoN modules, out of your 3D printed modules. Okay, so this is getting quite exciting. You could pretty much do anything you wanted within reason, as long as you're able to adjust the files on the Fusion 360. So that's what we're up to. Next year we'll be taking some modules to Evanston, and they'll be all going together in the biggest setup of FreemoN in the US ever. So it's going to be 1,800 linear feet of layout. I think one of my modules is supposed to be going right in the center of that, so I probably do need to build a new 90-degree crossing module, because I think that's the module going in the center. But that's 3D printed FreemoN modules. You could do the same thing with T-Track. You could do the same thing with your home layout. I've got a guy in There's a guy over in Ohio who is trying to print some modules for his home layout. So there's a whole world of possibilities beyond FreemoN with this. But yeah, that's where we're at. Thanks, Brooks. So
Wow.
2 questions, I guess.
Thank you. I think you just gave me a reason to buy the new Prusa XL so I can print modules.
Yeah, it's a nice printer. You don't need one that expensive though, but it is a nice printer.
Well,
I mean,
I like good stuff.
No, Elegoo is good. This is the new Elegoo Neptune 4 Max. It's about $450 if you get a good deal on it. And it's got automatic leveling, 120-point auto leveling. It'll print ABS if you want it to. It's currently printing there in PLA Plus, and it's just printing 2 90-degree corners just now. So that's what it's doing. It also is Wi-Fi enabled. You can connect it to your laptop and send prints directly. I'm a traditionalist, so I use a USB stick, but yeah, you don't need a really expensive printer. Don't scare everyone off doing it. The Prusa XL is a lot of money. A lot of money.
So I noticed on orienting the modules, because that has a lot to do with strength. Are you printing them mostly flat or standing up?
That's a great question. So I print so some things have to be printed standing up. So curves and these get printed standing up. Which doesn't cause any weakness. These are printed flat. So these get printed flat. It's just easier. Printed that vertical, then you would have to support this overhang here all the way from top to bottom, and that would just create a mess. That would not come away very cleanly. So that prints down. And one of the changes that I've made to my end plate design is the camera's like behind my laptop. So see the holes and then the sockets. So I've made some of my own. Like I said, you don't have to use C-clamps between your own sections of your module. So I've designed some of these things just to help me do alignment, but also this is to allow me to box the modules up better with a sheet of acrylic. So I'll be putting a sheet of acrylic and screwing 3 modules together so that they're clamped to the acrylic for transport. And then they'll just drop inside a box and then they're less likely to move around. So I've done that for my own transportation, but we'll see if it works. I'll feed back on whether that works or it just tears out, but hopefully it works. And because it's flush with the end module, it has no impact on the clamping of it. And they're outside the clamp zone as well. So there's no issues. You can do anything you want outside the clamp zone as long as the 2 plates can be flush. So.
And you haven't had any issues with it not being square or, running into that?
That's your printer. So yeah, of course. I've had the printer go a bit funny, but because it's tab and slot, it's as long as you clamp it when you glue it, it'll be square. And your foam, if you've got a little bit of bow in the sides, which sometimes happens when you're not using very much infill, when you put the foam cement in and you clamp it again to the piece of foam, if you cut that foam straight, it'll all start squaring itself up again. But it doesn't really matter. The only thing on a FreemoN module that has to be square is the end plate. And the track that meets the end plate, nothing else. You can be as wavy as you want in between anyway, if you want to. Like the curved modules. So
that's something I built some like 1 foot wide mini mows, and that's something I noticed. Like, of course, my dad's got a nice Delta Unisaw, but it, like doing the pocket screws, it was very hard. They still got just slightly out. So I could see doing this 3D printing could open up. Not everybody has a big table saw, or woodworking skills. So, it makes it kind of opens it up for everybody, wants to buy a 3D printer and print stuff. So that's cool. What kind of glue are you using to glue this together with?
So I'm just using Gorilla Glue at the minute.
Okay.
That's a bit messy. The better glue is something like Rocket rocket glue from Deluxe because it's non-fogging. So a non-fogging super glue would be better. But as you
Okay.
are in the US, you have access to glues that I can only dream of. So there's a product called 3D Gloop, which is the best thing for sticking PLA together. But I can't buy it in the UK at all. It was not cheap in the UK to start with. Now it's just not available. But it's about $30 or $40 a bottle. You don't need a lot of it, but it's solid. Your modules are indestructible once you've glued them together with that. But for what we're doing, because you've got that big foam, you've got that foam piece, it's pretty solid. And for foam, if I can find it, which I might not be able to, I use foam cement. You buy it off Amazon as well. And that, once when they've not got the foam topping, if I dropped one of those modules I held up earlier on the corner, they're going to break. But once that foam goes in, my 2-year-old has kicked one of these down the corridor and it's not done it any damage because that foam gives it the strength. So, as long as you don't kick straight into the foam where you've no support under it, it's reasonably strong. And for end scale, how much weight are you putting on this thing, right? So, 1-inch thick foam is more than adequate as a sub base. I wouldn't go any thinner than that, other than 20 mil. Like I had the option to do these in just foam board, but I think that's a little bit too weak at 10 mil. That's the thickest foam board you can get. You can in the US buy a product that is foam board that's got styrene top and bottom of it instead of paper. If you can get that, then you can make a whole module out of that stuff. That stuff is really, really strong. But as an alternative sub base, that's great. But I don't know how well the styrene will take scenery glues. That's the only thing. That's why I just use foam. So you know where you are with foam. So
I had another question. I was trying to think of it.
okay.
Holes. Like if you're modeling some holes in there, but say you printed it and you realize you need a hole for a wire, somewhere. Is it easy just to drill through there, or should you 3D print a whole new thing with a hole in it?
I ideally put a hole in the 3D design rather than a hole with a drill, because you've not got a lot that you're going through. But if you were, you can drill holes through it if you want to. I don't know why you would want to do that, because all your feeders are going to go through the foam. So you should be fine. And your feed wires for your FreemoN hangs below the end plate. So you shouldn't really need to drill any holes. But if you wanted to, within reason, you could drill anything you want through it, but it might start to splinter. So just got to be careful. Remember that you're not drilling something that's solid. You're drilling through something that's hollow.
I see.
So
Cool.
But you could drill. I mean, if I wanted to drill, say I realized after the fact that I wanted to fit a hole for something through the fascia. I can't think of why, but let's say I did. Then you could always drill your hole and then put some styrene pipe inside that hole to tidy that up. If you really have found some reason to do that, but realistically, you should have no reason to do that.
Well, does anybody else have any questions or?
I have a question, but it's not on this subject. So I'll defer till we've exhausted the subject. It's about a DCC concepts. I just want to ask Gordy what he knows about them.
Okay.
Am I still on?
Yeah, you're here.
Oh, okay. Gordy.
Yeah,
there's a UK company called DCC Concepts.
Yes.
I've been looking at some of their products. What do you know about the company? I mean, they got some nice looking products. thinking about ordering some, but since it's a non-American company, it's really hard to to call them up and talk to them. Can you tell me
So-
anything about
Yeah. So DCC Concepts actually started in Australia, and then they moved back to the UK. They used to be, I'm not sure where they are now. They used to be at Carnforth Railway Station. I think they've moved somewhere else now. They're now in Settle. They're still in a railway station, but they're in Settle, not Carnforth. They're a really good company. They're really good to work with. Their products are really good. I don't have any issues with their products at all. And my dad uses all of their products on his layout, so I can't complain at all. It depends what you want, but in terms of support and helping you out, they're great.
Well, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of reduced wiring, because basically all the wiring, and if I look at DCC Concepts, actually occurs, on the board that goes in. You only have one line. You're shipping basically DCC commands down the accessory bus to like in my case, where I'm looking is at my turnouts where I'm doing my switch machine, my tortoises, or they have one called the Cobalt IP switch machine. And I've picked up a couple of the switch machines, and like I said, I'm fascinated by them, but I'm just trying to, before I go off and spending a pot full of money on it, just trying to get some. Do you have a contact there that's a good guy to, I can maybe email with or whatever?
Well, you just usually go straight to them. It's usually the owner that responds. They're pretty good.
Okay.
They're a pretty good company where I don't have a particular contact that I can remember off the top of my head that we use there. I'd have to check with my dad, but they've always been pretty good. Their stuff's used on the testament of their stuff is it's used on hundreds and hundreds of layouts in the UK that are all portable at train shows every weekend. So it's got to be pretty bulletproof. It gets bashed around a lot, and it works. They're strong. Their turnout motors are strong enough to throw O-scale stuff, so they are pretty good.
Okay. Hey, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. There's another UK company you probably want to look at.
Okay.
It's not DCC that they do support DCC, but they are called Megapoints,
Mega Points. Okay.
and they have a MQTT system of their own that is Wi-Fi to connect your turnouts. So they're worth looking at.
Yeah, because the club I belong to is looking at, we're building a new layout to take around to shows and stuff. And so I'm trying to reduce the wiring as best I can, because that reduces a whole lot of other problems down the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll look at Mega Points. I'll look at them too. Thank you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You're welcome. And the other thing that one of the really cool things that DCC Concepts make is their levers. They call them the cobalt levers. And
Okay.
they allow you to mimic like an interlocking frame, but
Okay.
you can wire them electronically to electronically interlock.
Okay.
So if you don't pull the switches in a certain order, then the turnout won't move or the signal won't move or whatever. And you can interlock them like that. You can wire them to do that.
Okay. I'll look at
So
that too.
they're really cool. Yeah, my dad's got 100 levers in one of his signal cabins, so on his layout. All of them cobalt levers. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, that's like I said, that's one of the reasons I'm still in the exploration stage to figure out what I want to do here.
Yeah,
None of their stuff is particularly cheap, but all of it looks good.
it's definitely good. Yeah, it's very, very popular in the UK and Australia.
Okay.
So there's another company in the UK as well that's called Gauge Master. You may have come across them, but a lot of their DCC stuff is actually MRC rebadged. So it's not always the greatest in the modern era, but all the DCC concept stuff is their original stuff. So
Okay.
Cool. Does anybody else have any other questions about the modules?
now everyone's just
Cool.
waiting for you to buy the Pusher XL and start making modules for everyone.
Well, I got another project I got to get out of the workshop first for start building
I mean,
anything. So
there are people that do. There's somebody earlier who talked about T-Track. There is somebody
yeah,
who 3D prints T-Track modules, and you can do a whole single on the printer in one go if you wanted to, quite affordably. So
yeah,
there are options if you've not got enough space for a table saw, you know.
yeah. I was thinking size wise that doing these 3D printed things would be really, really lends itself to T-Track, or could with that. So that'd be
Yeah. Well,
cool.
when you're like me and you live at the end of the world, I am yet to find two things. There's two things here in Orkney I have yet to find. One is a straight piece of lumber, and two is a straight piece of plywood. That's just does not exist. That's not a concept that people have here. All of their all of their lumber is terrible, and their plywood's even worse. So much so they leave it outside in the rain.
And I
So
bet your plywood probably costs a lot more than it does here because it has to be brought over.
yeah, you add
Yeah,
10% to the mainland price just because it's got to come over on a boat.
yeah, yeah.
But it's terrible. The only thing that they use here is what they call sterling board, which is like OSB. It's massive, great big bits. It might as well be chipboard, and that's
Mhm.
the only plywood that comes here that's straight. And to make sure it's not wavy, they buy it in inch thick sections, and then they tend to panel out your garage in that when you build a new house. But the rest of our construction here is not really timber. It's concrete block and concrete because it's so windy. So we
Yeah.
don't use we don't build wooden houses, they blow away. So there's not that big emphasis on quality of timber or lumber coming into the island. No one's really interested.
Wow.
But you can buy many a straight fence post, but they're not very good for modules either. So
Wait until you
Got a
put
lot
up
of
with a
knots.
tornado.
there are a tornado today in Ireland. We have quite a few water spouts, but fortunately, touch wood, we haven't had a tornado on the island. But we do have some hurricane strength winds on a fairly regular basis. We generally call that Tuesday, and the rest of the UK they'll say there's light winds today, and then they'll say something like stronger winds in the north, and it's 95 mile an hour, 110 mile an hour winds, and it's just like stronger winds in the north. Yeah, and we just call that Tuesday. So it happens. So
Well, another thing I was wanting to see if you wanted to talk to us about is there any developments with the NMRA going on or news or does anybody have any questions like on the NMRA front to ask Gordy while we're here?
well, I'll tell you a few things, and then that might spark some questions. So there's a lot of things going on at national. We've done a lot in 2 years. We're still trying to do more than what we can probably do with the resources that we've got. I think next year you'll start to see us looking at more digitization of our operations. So there's a lot going on with fixing up our website, fixing up our infrastructure, fixing our membership system. That's potentially being replaced next year. Hopefully it is. So we've got a new task force for digital transformation for the NMRA that's looking at internal digital transformation, not looking at let's produce another digital product for membership. You'll notice that Lucy's come on board in social media. So now I'm sure you've been seeing a lot of posts more on LinkedIn, TikTok, which I can't get TikTok, but Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, or on the gram. You see all that kind of activity, and it's great. And in terms of what's that done to the organization, well, since the national convention in Texas this year, we've seen nothing but positive growth to the organization. So unless something catastrophic takes place in this month, this year should be the first year of positive growth in the NMRA membership numbers since 1992. year-on-year growth. So that's a huge change from where we have been, where we've seen 2.5% loss every year, year-on-year, some years more than that, but never less than that. So that's a huge turnaround for the organization. And now we need to continue to move that forward. And we'll be doing a lot of work in the next year to modernize our organization in the back office time, to try to just address some of the costs that we have because of that. And we're also going to implement monthly recurring membership fee. So people can sign up for 12 months, but pay off over 12 rather than paying in one go. So we're looking at being able to do that from probably, I'd ideally like to do it from April 1st. Whether we hit that or not, I don't know, but Speed's working really hard on that and a few other people, so maybe we will. And if you know Speed, which I know you do, you know how fast Speed gets stuff done. So we'll see whether that happens, but there's a lot of work to make that happen. We'll also be looking at allowing people as part of that to do an annual auto renewal or multi-year auto renewal. So whatever period you sign up for, if you want to automatically renew at the end of that period, your membership, then you will be able to. So it's that kind of stuff. There's lots of things we'd like to do as well around education, outreach, all those kind of things. And we will get to them, but we've got to make sure that we're building a solid foundation first. So we're going to be looking a bit introspectively. We're also looking at our branding and what does that look like. Currently, our brand nationwide or globally kind of looks very cluttered, like the back of my background. Lots of different N-scale locomotives. It's lots of different logos, all different colors, all different fonts. Looks completely different. Some people use the NMRA logos. Some people don't use it at all. People can go to train shows and go, what does the NMRA do for me? And they're standing there in an NMRA train show. You know, being a classic example. We don't call it the NMRA Plano show. We don't mention the NMRA at all. People just know it as the Plano show. So we've got to kind of turn that around. So we've got a project ongoing to look at our brand nationally, and then how do we roll that out all over the place. Like if you went to McDonald's, and every McDonald's that you go to, the colors were different, the logo was different, the text was different, and it was like, you know, like a different name even, and but by McDonald's. So here's another store just down the street, and it's a different name by McDonald's. They all have their own flavor. Every McDonald's restaurant that I've been to has the same menu, but they look different on the inside. Some have got localized, some have got nice murals, some of the buildings look differently. And it's probably not a great example. There are other, you know, other places that are similar to that nationwide, but have their own local flavor. We need the NMRA to be that so people can recognize it and come in through the door, because people join either a local division or the national NMRA. People joining know what they're joining and can recognize us. Whereas at the moment, if you ask a group of younger modelers what's the NMRA, they'll not know what it is. So, you know, or not even know it exists. And that's a challenge that we've got to overcome. So, you know, it's become more important than ever, really, that we have a consistent brand. So those are the projects that we're working on nationally. There's lots and lots of things going on. The standard stuff never stops. So the AP program never stops. The standards and conformance never stops. That's always going on all of the time. The promotion, the supporting different activities in model railroading around the world, that never stops. That's just the business as usual. So there's lots and lots happening all the time.
Gordy, what I would suggest as a thought to work on is that you go to clubs, and there's unfortunately a lot of clubs that do not believe that or a lot of members, I should properly say, do not believe that the NMRA is a good, valid organization, or they've come up with some bad feelings in the past. Those are some issues that need to be overcome.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of bad people who have bad blood or grudges out there, and I spend a lot of my time myth busting, and that's why we get out and we now make sure that there's a national representative for every single region convention. We come out and I do sessions like these all over the place to try to get out. We combat anything like that on the forums. If you go on the Model Railroad Hobbyist Forum, there's been a huge debates about what the NMRA is and isn't and what it should be. So you'll see lots of lots of us, answering and trying to change that message. Ultimately, we're trying to bring people back to the organization. So we promote people doing retention events. We just got to make sure that we don't reinforce those stereotypes when people do come back to us. But I know everyone's working really hard to make sure that happens. But ultimately, some of those people that bear those grudges and have borne those grudges for 20, 30 years, I can't change their opinion. I never will. But there's a whole fertile ground of model railroaders that are a lot younger that we need to bring into our organization if we want to sustain it. We want to see a lot more people mine and Brooks's age joining our organization, and we've got a challenge there that they don't even sometimes even know we exist. And someone mentioned earlier brick and mortar hobby shops going by the wayside. That's really tough for us as well, because we don't get to promote our organization as much as we would do. But it's also an opportunity, because we should be able to turn around and say, well, if you need that support to get you into model railroading as you're just starting out, come to us and we'll help you with it. So, there is an opportunity there for us to fill a void, but it's not easy if people don't know we exist in the first place. So I totally take that on board about people bearing grudges. It's very frustrating at times.
That's another issue that, your modular mode is easier to set up than the I can't even remember the exact, the HO size major table layouts. And so yours and T-Track are very similar that I see in terms of being able to set them up fairly easily and getting those sort of operations out into the public, like I had mentioned before, so that people can see what our hobby is.
Absolutely, yeah. And house sizes are getting smaller and smaller. Sometimes you don't feel like that when I drive around in the US and I'm like, how big is that house? But for the majority of people that are coming into the hobby, their house is going to be smaller than the people that came into the hobby before them. And so having the ability to do FreemoN modules or T-Track, be able to store that at home and bring that out to, and set up as part of a bigger layout because they just physically don't have the space to do it, is a huge benefit to people. And so, yeah, I think that this is the way that things are going to go. I think I can see people already that have started to convert to having modular layouts as their home layout. I don't think the big basement empire has gone away, but it's very much an off-putting thing to some people that are just starting out, because how on earth can I get to that standard, or how can I ever make something that big? And then those that are foolish enough or brave enough to try without having much experience tend to give it up as too much like hard work after a couple of months or a year or a couple of years of not seeing any progress on that monster layout. Whereas FreemoN Modules, me and my daughter can sit up here and make a module over a couple of weeks, and then we've got a module and it's done. And the next time we set up the modules, it gets bigger. My train room in my house is a modular space. I call it the multifunctional train room. So it's finished, like a finished room in the house. It's on the ground floor, first floor of my house. I can take the modular layout out of there that's there. It's got some fixed shelving space, some racking where I can put shelving on the wall, but that can come off and I can set up my modules at whatever height I want in that corner of the room. The whole center of the room can be completely cleared out in a day, and a new layout can be set up in there, new modular layout. So it gives me a lot of flexibility, and the long-term plan for us is to have a winter layout and a summer layout with winter scenery and summer scenery, and we'll swap them around depending which half of the year we're in. So if it's in summer, we'll have the winter scenery, and if it's in winter, we'll have this. So we can swap it around to whatever season it's not. So yeah, there is advantages to it for sure. I think that's where do we go? It was 40 years ago. It was not 40 years ago. Was it 60 years ago that the concept of mushroom layouts was first produced? And only really now are we seeing some of the big mushroom layouts getting finished and people really embracing that concept. So where does T-Track? People are starting to do modular operations using T-Track. People are starting to go big into FreemoN, and I just who knows where the hobby will be in another 20 years time or 30 years time. So 3D printing modules might just be normal, and this someone will stumble across this recording and go, "What? That's just what we do anyway," because plywood's now ridiculously expensive, and we've gone from veganism to not chopping tree downism. Who knows? So, who knows where it goes.
Hey, Gordy,
Jeff?
I know why I joined the NMRA, but one of the things that the NMRA does not do very well is advertise what they do. And what I mean by that is the standards, is the compliance. Because to me, that's one of the reasons I joined the hobby, because I could start all this. Because when I started playing with trains, Lionel didn't hook up with anybody, but neither did Atlas, neither did Athearn, neither did anybody, or Tyco. None of those hooked up. Whereas as the NMRA did their thing, for lack of better terms, I'm not going to, because I don't know what all's involved. They all of a sudden, coupling became standardized, car heights became standardized, and so it became a viable hobby where I could go out and buy an Atlas, freight car, and I could connect it up to an Athearn engine. Whereas, like I said, in the late 50s and early 60s, that wasn't even a possibility. So there's, what I'm trying to say is you guys don't toot your own horn very well.
I agree, but it's also that's an angle that doesn't necessarily appeal to everybody either. People go, well, so the standards have been written. So we are working on improving people's, what we're saying about our standards and what we do, and talking about it a bit more. But you're right, we need to do more of it, and we know that.
Well, no, I wasn't picking on just standardization. That was the reason that I joined. Okay, years and years and years ago. There are other things, other aspects of in the NMRA, the SIG groups and stuff like that are relevant to a lot more people today. I picked on standards because that was my thing, 30 years ago. 20 years ago for me. Now it's more of the people like to play with trains. They like to do operations. So that's one of those significant things that the NMRA also is involved in, and looking at how to make things better in those areas. And so you guys are doing it well, but nobody knows about it unless you go to a convention and then you find out about a SIG group.
I totally agree. And that's why a lot of why we brought Lucy on board.
I'd like to back up what Jeff is saying, because that was part of the reasons what I joined, and that was not that many years ago. And you need to get out again. What does the NMRA offer? The broad scope of things, and trying to, when people come in and they talk to, when I was in the booth in Plano, where I was always emphasizing, hey, you got all these different clubs around here and all these different vendors, they can interconnect because of what we do.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and that's why we've brought Lucy on board. That's why we're working hard on our marketing, because we know it's an area that we need to improve. So yeah, absolutely, we're working on that. We're doing what we can. Some of it was beyond our control, because we can't control what happens at a local level. Not everybody's got a division super as good as Brooks, so it's a challenge, But we are working on that as an organization. We're certainly doing more than that than I think we've done for a very long time. But we absolutely need to do a lot more of it. So we will be doing that. And, it's the same with it. It's like we're spending a lot of time at the moment working with different scales to blow the myth out the water that NMRA is just HO, because that's a total myth. NMRA doesn't do narrow gauge. That's a myth as well. So we are trying to bust some of those myths by working with the groups that are involved. Like the S-Scale Association, we've just done them a new standards gauge because they needed one. They lost the drawing of theirs, so we redid it for them. We've also worked heavily with the N-Scale group this last year. We'll be working with probably S-Scalers more next year. and yeah, many other groups. RPM as well is another area where we provide the insurance for most of the RPM meets, but they deny the existence of the NMRA on a regular basis and try to say they're some way better than the NMRA because of the way that they do things. I've been to an RPM meet now. I know that's not the case. We need to work together, if anything. But they have models on display, but it's a lot of the same models that you see from years ago. Whereas people tend to build a contest model for the NMRA and bring it to a contest once. They don't bring it more than once, so people only ever see it once. RPM, people bring the same models over and over again, and that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's why it sometimes appears that they've got more models than we have. And then RPM does clinics. I would say, arguably, some of the RPM clinics are of a higher standard than some of our clinics, but our clinics are more general than their clinics. So it's just different, different content for different audience. But the camaraderie and the purpose and what we're trying to do is very similar. And we supporting them doing it because they're promoting scale model railroading. It's in our mission. So yeah, we've got a bit muff the bust the myths, not myth the busts. Bust the myths on a lot of these things, and we are the national team is trying to do that. Hence why we brought on and invested in marketing. So just watch this space. But if anyone wants to get involved and help with that, then they're welcome to.
Hey, Gordy, do you think we'll get the SIG publications that are electronic on alongside the NMRA monthly magazine on the same platform?
I hope so. I think the SIGs would be pushing against an open door if they wanted to do that. It's just that we can't then limit who has access to that publication. That's their challenge. So we can give people access to the app, but that's where the authentication ends. So we're not able to say, right, if you're a member of LDSIG, only LDSIG members can access the LDSIG journal. And that would be where the SIGs would come unstuck a little bit at the moment. So
okay.
but,
and then I have a go ahead. Sorry.
What we're trying to do on that first is we're trying to offer putting some of the regional publications on there.
Oh, yeah.
For the regions that are not concerned about everybody having access to it. So we're working on that as well.
Okay. And then I have a suggestion. Don Wynn apparently won the Rail Pass contest at the National. Is that right, Don? I don't know if he's still on or not. But I think he was the only entry.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry, I was on mute, but yes, I was the only entry.
I'd like to suggest the next time be the sticker contest. All these guys have stickers for their layouts. Maybe we could have a sticker contest board instead of a rail pass. Maybe that's a little more current in terms of.
We should do that. That's a really good idea. That's a really good idea. Well, send that suggestion to the contest chair, Bill Brown.
Okay.
And I'm sure he'd do that. That's a really good idea. Yeah, I'll be seeing him in a few months. I'll see him at Springfield and I'll mention it to him again there. But that's a really good idea. So yeah, I like that one. There's stuff like that. We're not changing what we do. We're just adapting it, or enhancing it. And that's all I seek to do with the NMRA.
Yeah.
Is that,
and,
make things sustainable.
My compliments, Gordy. You've done a great job.
Thank you, but it's the team. It's not one person, so it's a team.
Yeah, but you're the catalyst to kickstart it.
Yeah, just do what I do, which is enable. All we do is we enable and we enable and we empower. So that's all we seek to do. But it's working, so hopefully. And I see with this division, and it's great to see so many of you here because I've been here before very early days, and it was me and Brooke. It was me and Brooks, and that was it.
Yeah,
so,
that was
awesome.
I think that was my second meeting or something. Yeah, you and I talked for 45 minutes, and then somebody else joined after 45 minutes later, and yeah,
that was awesome. So,
yeah.
But anyway, look how far we've got on this module while we've been talking. We're just over an inch higher. We are at just under an inch high. So There we go. It's got another 7 hours to go. So anyway, thanks everyone. If that's all of your questions, I will let you get on and I'll go and try and get the second set of NFL games for the night. So
Yeah,
onwards,
well, I
so
Much
appreciate you
appreciate.
joining. Yeah.
thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your meeting. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Good to see you,
you.
Gordy.
It was interesting.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Well, I think that'll conclude the meeting here. So I'll keep the room open if anybody wants to talk. But before we go, I've got a few. So the next meeting is going to be in January on. Get to my calendar. January 15th, and I just got confirmation after I sent the email out, the newsletter out. So I'm going to have Steve Sandifer present the second half of his livestock clinic then. And then February, that's on February 19th, and looking at getting I don't know how to pronounce her first name. She presented at the Marita Richards, I think. I want to say Marta, but that's probably not the way to say it. So anyway, I asked her about presenting her clinic on the Pullman coach company on that. So looking at February on that, and so those will be coming out on the next newsletter coming up. So stay tuned for that. And I think until then, just remember to the Lone Star Region Convention's coming up in February. So and be sure to sign up for that if you're able to go. Like to see you there. So with that, I'll close the meeting out. We'll see you next month.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks,
See
Brooks.
y'all later.
Thanks, Brooks.
Thanks, Brooks.
Thank you.
Thank you.